The storm had no mercy. Snowflakes sharp as glass tore across the barren landscape of Karnas 9, a planet notorious in the galaxy for its deadly cold. Twin moons hung low in the sky, casting a silver glare over the jagged icy plains. The temperature plunged to levels that would have killed most life within minutes. Yet here stood dozens of cadets from countless alien civilizations, sent by the Galactic Academy to face their ultimate survival exam. The humans were few, only 6 in number, and small compared to the towering alien species. Their leader, Lieutenant Mason Hale, stood with a calm expression, his breath forming mist in the icy air. His eyes scanned the horizon, calculating, patient. Around him, the other human cadets shivered but trusted his leadership. A loud, metallic voice echoed across the snowy field. "Welcome, cadets. This is your final test. Survive 72 hours on Karnas 9. You will receive no additional supplies. Only the last group standing will earn the title Elite Cadre." The words reverberated through the storm, but the humans hardly flinched. A Zyrak warrior, taller than any human by nearly 2 meters, flexed his claws and sneered. "Your puny human bodies will freeze in less than an hour." Mason smiled faintly. "We'll see about that," he said, his voice steady. The storm hit with sudden fury. Winds like whips tore at the cadets' uniforms. Tents from other species were shredded instantly, and delicate equipment cracked under the cold. The alien cadets cursed, some trying to light emergency fires only to watch them snuffed out by the wind. The humans, however, moved calmly toward a rocky ridge a few hundred meters away. "Ridge ahead," Mason called. "It's our first line of defense. We need cover and we need heat. Let's get to work." Private Lena Ortiz, the human engineer, examined the small emergency heaters they had carried. "Sir, these won't last long in this cold. Batteries drop faster than expected." Mason's eyes scanned the terrain. "Then we'll make something that lasts. Humans survive by thinking, not by waiting." He turned to the others. "Use the rocks, dig, build, insulate, work in shifts." The team split into pairs, digging shallow caves into the ridge. They used every piece of equipment wisely, breaking the surface ice to build walls, covering gaps with insulated panels and emergency blankets. Their hands were numb, their fingers stiff, but they worked relentlessly. Mason himself carried rocks and metal plates, organizing the structure's framework. Hours passed, and the storm showed no sign of mercy. The taller alien species struggled. Valorians, lizard-like warriors with scales designed for heat, tried huddling together for warmth. Their bodies slowed, their movements clumsy as frost seeped into their scales. The taller Garathians, massive beings covered in thick fur, looked strong, but even their dense coats froze from the inside out. Meanwhile, the humans persevered. Mason instructed Ortiz to combine the heaters with a makeshift thermal core. She took old wires, metallic plates, and a small engine scavenged from their pack, connecting it carefully to create a self-regulating heat source. "Sir, it's ready," Ortiz said, her voice tinged with excitement. "It's not much, but it will last if we conserve energy." Mason checked the temperature readings. -80 degrees outside, -5 inside. "Good," he said. "Better than outside. Now everyone in. Rotate shifts to maintain the heat." As the humans huddled inside, their shelter began to glow with warmth. Steam rose from the thermal core, spreading through the rocks. They could see their breath in the air, but at least their fingers and toes were safe for the moment. Outside, the aliens were suffering. A Valorian, his blue scales paling, stumbled near the human entrance. Frost covered his body and his movements were sluggish. The humans watched him silently. For a second, Mason hesitated, thinking about the risk. Sharing heat with a stranger in the middle of the test could cost them their chance at victory. Then he opened the door. "Get in," Mason said firmly. The Valorian's eyes widened. "You would help me?" Mason shrugged. "We're humans. We survive by helping each other, not by waiting to die." The alien crawled inside, shaking and amazed. The humans quickly made space, covering him with blankets and adjusting the heater to maximize warmth. Night fell, bringing with it a howling storm that felt like the entire planet was screaming. Visibility dropped to near zero. Outside, the other cadets were vanishing into the cold one by one. Shouts turned into desperate cries, then silence. Inside the shelter, the humans maintained their focus. They rotated shifts to keep the thermal core functioning. Mason shared simple instructions. Monitor the temperature. Keep the core stable. No one falls asleep for too long. Frostbite comes quietly. Private Ortiz smiled as she checked the core's pressure gauge. We actually have heat. Real heat? Mason nodded, eyes scanning the small cave. Adaptation wins here. Others are counting on their strength or fear. We count on brains and teamwork. Hours became days. The aliens outside were slowly succumbing. Some tried to build shelters hastily, only to see them collapse under the wind. Others froze while searching for fire or food. Even the taller species, confident and boastful, fell one by one. The humans, though few in number, survived by carefully managing resources, sharing warmth and thinking ahead. The Valorian, now conscious and recovering, stared at the humans in disbelief. Your species survives by thinking instead of brute force. Mason gave a faint smile. Brains over brawn, always. You'd survive too if you tried it. By the end of the first day, the humans had built a secure, heated shelter with walls thick enough to block the worst of the storm. They had rationed their supplies and maintained morale. The other species, large and strong, had underestimated the humans' ingenuity. Slowly, those aliens outside began to fail, leaving the humans as one of the few functioning groups. That night, Mason sat quietly near the thermal core, watching the snow swirl outside like a white storm of despair. Lena Ortiz cleaned and checked the machinery, keeping it functional. Others took turns keeping watch for any stranded cadets in need of help. Mason reflected on the irony. The humans had been mocked for being small and weak, yet here they were, alive, warm, and organized, while many of the stronger, taller species struggled to survive. The storm continued its relentless assault, but the humans adapted. They had planned, built, and survived, and as humans always did. Outside, the frozen landscape stretched endlessly. Twin moons reflected off the ice, casting eerie shadows. The alien cadets who had laughed at the humans were slowly disappearing into the cold. Some would be rescued by the Academy's emergency teams, but many would not. Inside the heated shelter, the humans were not only alive, they were thriving. Steam filled the air. Warmth spread across their bodies, and hope was alive. Mason looked at his team and nodded. Tomorrow, he said, we continue. We survive. And we help anyone else willing to adapt. The storm outside roared like an ancient beast, but inside humans survived, and in the frozen darkness, one truth became clear to the survivors. Humans were not to be underestimated. Not now, not ever. The night on Carnus 9 stretched endlessly. Outside, the storm raged with unrelenting fury. Snow swept across the frozen plains like a living sea, and icy winds threatened to tear apart anything left exposed. Even the strongest alien species struggled against the cold. The few that had survived the first day huddled in makeshift shelters, their bodies trembling, their morale fading. Inside the human shelter, however, warmth prevailed. The thermal core glowed steadily, and Mason Hale paced slowly along the walls, checking the insulation. Steam rose from the core, spreading evenly through the cave. His eyes scanned the dimly lit interior, observing his small team. Each member worked tirelessly. Some repaired the core, some inspected supplies, and others kept watch at the entrance. Private Lena Ortiz adjusted the energy output of the heater. Sir, if we reduce power for a short period, we can save enough fuel to last 2 more days, she said. Her hands, red from the cold, moved with precision. Mason nodded. Good, rotate usage carefully. The storm is not going to let up. Hours passed, and the first signs of movement outside began. Shadowy figures stumbled across the snow. Frost-covered and weak, several alien cadets had somehow survived the initial night. They were desperate, exhausted, and on the verge of collapse. Mason made a decision. We opened the door. Bring them in. Heat saves lives, and lives are worth saving. Some human cadets hesitated. Helping aliens could put their shelter at risk. Every extra body would increase the load on the thermal core. But Mason's gaze was firm. We survive by helping. That is human nature. The first to enter was a Valorian, trembling and pale. Its scales were frosted, and it could barely stand. Mason guided it inside, wrapping it in blankets and positioning it close to the heater. Steam and warmth slowly thawed the alien's body. Its eyes widened as it realized it would survive the night. The second was a Garathian, massive and furry, who had fallen outside. Despite its size, frost had slowed its movements, and without help, it would not have lasted long. The humans worked together to pull it inside, careful not to damage the fragile cave walls. By sunrise, the humans had saved 4 more alien cadets. Each one was weak, frostbitten, and in shock. Yet they were alive. Mason observed them quietly. We give warmth, but we also teach. They must understand. Survival comes from cooperation, not pride. The aliens looked at the humans in awe. None of them had expected help from a species they considered small and weak. Some even whispered among themselves, questioning their earlier arrogance. The day brought new challenges. The storm intensified and the temperature dropped further. Even inside the shelter, the core struggled to maintain warmth. Mason gathered his team. We need to improve insulation. Every wall, every gap counts. We cannot let anyone freeze, human or alien. The cadets worked tirelessly. They layered blankets, packed snow into cracks to block drafts, and even used melted ice to reinforce the cave walls. The thermal core hummed with effort, radiating warmth across the small interior. Outside, the storm continued its assault. Alien teams who had refused help or tried to build independent shelters were failing. Some froze where they stood. Others wandered aimlessly, lost in white blindness. The humans could see their struggles through the snow, but there was little they could do beyond their shelter. Yet inside, life thrived. The humans had created more than just warmth. They had created hope. The aliens they saved were starting to regain strength, and slowly, gratitude replaced fear. One of the Valorians, still shivering but recovering, spoke to Mason. Your species survives differently. You think, plan, and care. It is remarkable. Mason smiled faintly. We survive because we adapt. We survive because we work together. It is simple, but it works. Even the Garathian nodded, flexing its massive limbs. I underestimated you humans. I thought small meant weak. I see now. You are strong in ways we did not understand. By the second night, the humans' shelter had grown crowded, yet Mason remained calm. He had planned for such a scenario. Extra blankets, rotating positions near the heater, and careful rationing of supplies allowed everyone to survive. But survival was only the first step. Mason had another goal, teaching these aliens a new way to face extreme conditions. He gathered them around the heater. Listen carefully, Mason said. Survival is more than heat or strength. It is knowledge, teamwork, and planning. You need to anticipate problems before they arrive. Use what you have. Don't wait for rescue. The storm will not wait. The aliens listened, some nodding, some wide-eyed. The lesson was harsh but necessary. Mason continued. Here, we work as a group. Everyone contributes. Every life matters. That is how humans survive, and that is how you can survive too. A few hours later, another wave of frozen cadets stumbled toward the shelter. Some were too weak to walk alone. The humans coordinated immediately, dividing tasks. Some carried the newcomers, others wrapped them in blankets, and the rest maintained the thermal core. One alien whispered, You risk your survival to save others? Mason replied simply, Yes. That is human nature. We do not survive alone. We survive together. The storm continued through the night, and the humans' shelter became a beacon of life in a frozen world. Cadets from multiple alien species began seeking help, guided by the warmth and light inside. Some had never known kindness from outside their own species. And now, in the heart of a frozen hell, they saw humans not as weak prey but as strong leaders and protectors. By the third day, the shelter had become a miniature community. Humans and rescued aliens worked together to reinforce the structure. They shared energy, food rations, and strategies for surviving the brutal cold. Outside, the storm raged, but inside, a sense of hope and camaraderie grew stronger. Mason looked at his team with quiet pride. We've done more than survive, he said. We've shown the galaxy what humans can do. Brains, courage, and compassion, that is our strength. Remember this, and even if we leave Karnas 9, the lesson stays. As the storm finally eased slightly, the humans realized something incredible. Most alien teams had either failed or abandoned hope. Only those who had accepted help and learned from the humans were alive. The Galactic Academy's harsh test had been meant to challenge strength and survival instinct. But the humans had demonstrated something the instructors had not fully considered. Intelligence, teamwork, and compassion could triumph over brute force and pride. Mason smiled at the group around him. Humans and aliens alike. Tomorrow, he said, we continue. We find a way to keep everyone alive, and we make sure no one underestimates humans ever again. The aliens looked at each other, amazed and humbled. Some whispered quietly, the humans, they are not what we expected. They are stronger than any of us thought. In the frozen darkness, a single truth had begun to spread. Humans survive against all odds, and they thrive where others fail. Inside the shelter, the thermal core hummed softly. Outside, the white storm stretched endlessly, but now the humans and their newfound allies were ready. They would not just survive. They would endure, adapt, and overcome. The first part of the survival exam had been brutal, but the humans had turned it into something more. A symbol of hope in a frozen world. A lesson for all species and a testament to human ingenuity and courage, and so, in the heart of Karnas 9, amid the blizzards and frozen plains, the humans prepared for the challenges to come, knowing that no storm, no matter how fierce, could break their spirit. The storm on Karnas 9 had shown no mercy for 3 days. Outside, blizzards raged, twisting the snow into walls and drifts taller than some of the smaller alien cadets. Visibility dropped to near zero, and the freezing wind made it almost impossible to move. Even the toughest aliens began to lose hope. The few that remained alive were scattered across the frozen plains, weak and desperate. Inside the human-built shelter, life was tense but stable. The thermal core continued to hum, providing warmth, though it required constant monitoring. Mason Hale paced along the walls, his eyes sharp, assessing every corner. He had survived harsher conditions on Earth, but Karnas 9 was unique. The planet seemed designed to challenge not just strength but intelligence, patience, and teamwork. Lena Ortiz knelt near the core, checking the wiring and adjusting output. "Sir, the core's efficiency is dropping slightly. If the storm lasts much longer, it may not sustain the current heat level for all of us." Mason nodded thoughtfully. "Then we need to improvise. We can't just rely on this machine. Humans survive by creating solutions." He looked at the recovering aliens around them. "Everyone, listen carefully. We're going to build a secondary heat system using what we have left. Blankets, metallic panels, even rocks. Layer everything. Every small step counts." The cadets worked quickly, motivated by the cold and the knowledge that failure meant death. They stacked rocks around the cave, insulated walls with blankets and emergency tarps, and even built smaller heat traps to reflect warmth toward those farther from the core. The Valorian, still shivering, carried panels carefully, learning from the humans how to use limited resources efficiently. Outside, the storm worsened. A massive wind gust tore across the ridge, shaking rocks loose and erasing footprints in seconds. Any cadet caught in the open would have little chance of survival. The humans knew this, and Mason kept an eye on movement beyond the shelter. Hours later, the true danger arrived. A massive avalanche triggered by the wind and heavy snow began sliding down the ridge, threatening the shelter itself. Rocks and ice thundered toward them. The humans reacted instantly. Mason shouted instructions. "Reinforce the front walls. Move the core back. Everyone hold the panels tight." Cadets scrambled. Rocks and metal sheets were stacked as barricades. The thermal core was moved toward the center of the shelter. The humans' quick thinking and coordination prevented disaster. The avalanche hit with a deafening roar, but the shelter remained intact, only slightly battered. When silence returned, Mason looked at his team, breathing hard. "That was close. But we survived." Ortiz wiped snow from her face. "This storm. It's testing everything we've built," Mason nodded. "Exactly. But humans don't just survive, we adapt, we improve. That is the difference." The aliens inside were amazed. They had watched humans calmly organize and act while others panicked. The Garathian, its fur covered in ice crystals, muttered in awe. "I never imagined such intelligence. Humans are precise, fearless, and smart." The storm raged on for hours. By nightfall, exhaustion hit everyone. Yet Mason refused to allow anyone to sleep too deeply, knowing frostbite and hypothermia were constant threats. Short shifts, rotate, keep the warmth, keep the body moving. Survival is not just heat, it's vigilance. The night brought an unexpected development. A group of alien cadets from a distant planet, who had ignored the warnings and tried independent shelters, arrived at the humans' cave, barely alive. Frost covered them like statues. They collapsed at the entrance, their bodies shaking violently. Mason's team moved without hesitation. They carried the frozen aliens inside, wrapping them in blankets and placing them near the thermal traps. Every cadet contributed. The humans used their understanding of body heat, layering, and controlled breathing to revive the newcomers slowly. One Valorian, now alert and fully thawed, watched this process quietly. "Your species, Saves others even when it could be dangerous, that is. Unbelievable, Mason gave a small smile. We survive together or we fail alone. That is human nature. You can learn it too if you choose. By dawn, the shelter had grown crowded. Human cadets, the Valorian, the Garathian, and the newly rescued aliens worked side by side. They shared knowledge, advice, and tasks. Food and water were limited, but careful rationing kept everyone alive. The humans had not just created a shelter, they had created a functioning survival system. Outside, the storm began to weaken slightly, revealing the true scale of destruction. Dozens of alien cadets had failed to survive the last 3 days. The once proud groups were now shadows in the snow, some wandering aimlessly, some frozen in place. Only those who had adapted, cooperated, or sought human help remained. Mason gathered the group near the heater. This storm is a test, he said. Not just of strength, but of intelligence, teamwork, and compassion. Humans survive because we plan, we adapt, and we help each other. The storm does not care who you are, your species, your size, or your pride. Only action saves lives, the aliens listened in awe. Many whispered among themselves. We underestimated them. Completely, said one. They are small, yes, but their minds are sharp. The day continued with small victories. The humans taught the aliens how to melt snow for water using the heat core, how to maintain body temperature, and even how to reinforce the cave further. Each lesson improved the survival chances for everyone inside. The humans' careful planning had turned the shelter into a beacon of life amidst a frozen hell. By evening, Mason realized they needed more long-term solutions. We can't just survive inside the cave. We need to expand and make it sustainable if the storm continues. Rocks outside can be used as windbreaks. Snow can be compacted for insulation. Every layer counts. Ortiz smiled, her hands red and cracked from the cold. Sir, we can do it. We have enough energy and materials if we rotate shifts. Mason nodded. Good, let's build. Let's not just survive. Let's make a fortress against this storm. The cadets worked through the night, stacking snow walls around the cave, reinforcing entrances with metallic panels, and even creating secondary heat pockets outside for any cadet who became trapped or lost in the snow. By the time the first light of dawn appeared, the shelter had grown into a small fortress, strong, insulated, and organized. For the first time, the aliens outside understood what humans truly represented. They were not the strongest, not the largest, but they were the most adaptable, the most clever, and the most determined. Survival was not just a matter of physical strength. It was a matter of mind, teamwork, and courage. Mason looked at the team, humans and aliens alike, and felt a surge of pride. The turning point is here, he said. We survived the worst, adapted, and taught others to do the same. This is what humans do. We do not give up. We find a way always. The storm was weakening, but the lessons it had taught were permanent. One by one, the aliens who had once mocked the humans began to respect them deeply. They had witnessed ingenuity, courage, and leadership in the harshest conditions imaginable. In the silence after the storm, a single truth spread among the survivors. Humans are not to be underestimated. Ever. The humans had transformed the test from a battle of brute strength into a showcase of intelligence, resourcefulness, and leadership. What had begun as a simple survival exam had now become a living demonstration of HFY, humans, capable of overcoming impossible odds with brains, courage, and heart. Mason stared at the horizon. The snow had cleared slightly, revealing distant alien shelters that had collapsed. Only a few surviving cadets would reach them in time. But those who had taken refuge with humans were alive, learning and thriving. This is just the beginning, Mason said quietly. Tomorrow we keep pushing. We adapt further. We survive, not just for ourselves, but for everyone who is willing to learn. And so, in the frozen plains of Karnis 9, the humans prepared for the next challenge. The storm had tested them, nearly broken them, and challenged every instinct. Yet they endured. They built, they adapted, they saved lives. And they sent a clear message to the galaxy. Humanity survives where others fail. Humanity thrives where others perish. The shelter glowed warmly against the pale, icy dawn. Inside, humans and aliens alike worked together, their hearts filled with hope. Outside, the frozen world remained harsh, unyielding, and deadly. But inside, life had won. through intelligence, courage, and unwavering human determination. The turning point had come. The humans had not just survived, they had changed the game entirely. The sun barely rose over Karnas 9, barely piercing the storm's lingering clouds. The frozen plains glimmered under pale light, a white expanse of ice and snow stretching to the horizon. Outside the human shelter, the remnants of the storm still raged in swirling drifts, but the immediate danger had passed. Inside, the humans moved with practiced efficiency. Lieutenant Mason Hale surveyed the small fortress they had built, now reinforced with layered snow walls, metallic panels, and clever insulation. The thermal core hummed steadily, providing warmth that even the recently rescued aliens could not believe possible. "Morning check," Mason said, his voice calm but firm. "Core efficiency is stable. Heat pockets are working, supplies, enough for now, but ration carefully. Today will be a long day." Private Lena Ortiz nodded, scanning the energy outputs of both the primary and secondary heat systems. "We've got roughly 60 hours of energy at current consumption. If we manage carefully, everyone survives until extraction. But we should plan for improvisation." Mason smiled faintly. "Improvisation is human nature. Let's show everyone why." The day's mission was clear: expand, adapt, and strengthen the shelter while keeping everyone alive. Humans and rescued aliens worked side by side, digging snow trenches, reinforcing walls, and creating windbreaks outside the main cave. The shelter now resembled a small fortress rather than a simple survival cave. Outside, the alien teams that had ignored the humans' offer for help were scattered, weak, and suffering. Some tried to rebuild their shelters, but their efforts were clumsy and uncoordinated. The humans had already demonstrated the key to survival. Planning, intelligence, and teamwork were far more important than size or brute strength. By midday, Mason gathered the group, including the recovering aliens. "Listen carefully," he said. "The storm may be over for now, but Karnas 9 is unpredictable. There are avalanches, ice fissures, and sudden winds. Strength alone will not keep you alive. Humans survive because we adapt faster than the environment changes. We observe, plan, and act. That is our advantage." A Garathian, its massive fur thawing but still damp from the storm, looked at him in awe. "I see it now. You humans are not just clever, you are precise." "Every action counts," Mason nodded. "Every choice matters. Every layer of insulation, every heat pocket, every rationed meal, it adds up. Small mistakes here mean death. Small victories mean survival." The Valorian, who had regained full strength, pointed to the open plains. "What about others who are outside?" "They will not survive long without guidance." Mason's expression hardened. "Then we help where we can. But first we strengthen what we have. Once the fortress is secure, we can reach out. Efficiency is key. We save as many as possible without risking the core group." The team divided tasks efficiently. Humans led the effort, demonstrating every technique to the aliens. Compacting snow for insulation, positioning rocks to break the wind, constructing secondary heat pockets that reflected warmth into outer areas, and using melted ice for water. By late afternoon, the shelter had expanded significantly. New heat pockets had been established outside the main cave, allowing any wandering cadet to warm briefly before moving closer. The humans had effectively created a network of safe zones across the icy ridge. Suddenly, a distant cry echoed across the frozen plains. Mason's eyes sharpened. Someone's out there, likely struggling to survive. We move fast. The humans equipped themselves with portable heaters, blankets, and improvised sleds to rescue stranded cadets. The Valorian and Garathian volunteered to help carry the weaker survivors. Together, they braved the cold, moving swiftly and efficiently across the white wasteland. They found a group of smaller alien cadets trapped in a shallow fissure, unable to climb out due to the ice's slick surface. The humans worked without hesitation, using sleds, ropes, and careful coordination to haul them to safety. Frostbitten and exhausted, the survivors collapsed into the nearest heat pocket, gasping in relief. Mason observed quietly, noting each step. Every action must be deliberate, every movement calculated. That is the human advantage. We survive not because we are the strongest, but because we think faster, act faster, and adapt faster. The rescued aliens looked around in disbelief. They had expected humans to struggle, to be cold and weak. Yet here they were, fully functional, organized, and resilient. Back at the shelter, The humans began instructing the newcomers in the survival strategies they had developed. Each person learned quickly, guided by examples, how to maintain warmth, how to ration energy, how to stay alert against the dangers of the frozen world. By nightfall, the shelter had grown crowded. Dozens of cadets, previously frozen and defeated, now huddled together, warm and slowly regaining strength. Mason called a council, including humans and aliens. "Today we survived more than just the storm," Mason said. "We survived pride, fear, and inexperience. We turned the environment into an advantage. Humans do not wait for survival, we take it. We build, we adapt, and we lead. That is our edge. That is why the galaxy fears us when we act with purpose." The Garathian spoke, its voice deep and respectful. "You have taught us more than we could imagine. Not by force, but by example. Humans are remarkable," Mason nodded. "Remarkable, yes. But only because we prepare, we plan, and we cooperate. Every species can survive, but not all choose to adapt. That is why humans endure." Even the Valorian, once skeptical and distant, now fully recovered, added, "You make survival look simple, but I know it is not. You think, plan, and act with precision." Mason smiled faintly. "Simple, yes, but simple does not mean easy. Survival is never easy. It requires discipline, focus, and intelligence. And humans, we excel at all three." That night, the humans rotated duties carefully. Each heat pocket was monitored, each layer of insulation checked, each cadet observed for signs of frostbite or exhaustion. They had learned from the storm. Vigilance was as important as warmth. Outside, distant shadows moved across the snow, but the humans were prepared. Portable heat pockets, light reflectors, and makeshift windbreaks allowed them to guide stranded cadets safely back to the shelter. They had created a human network of survival, stretching across the icy plains. Mason looked at his team, now resting briefly near the core. "Tomorrow we push further. We extend our advantage. We make this shelter not just a refuge, but a stronghold against Karnas 9 itself. Every layer, every pocket, every action counts." Ortiz nodded, adjusting the final panels of insulation. "Sir, this place, it is more than a shelter now. It is a fortress. If the storm returns, we can withstand it longer than anyone expected." Mason's gaze drifted toward the horizon, where faint blizzards still danced. "Humans survive not because we hope, not because we are lucky, but because we act. We see, we plan, and we execute. Others may freeze in fear. Others may fail in arrogance. We adapt, and that is why we thrive." The night passed uneventfully, but the human advantage had become clear to all survivors. The aliens who had mocked humans at the beginning of the exam now recognized a new truth. Brains, courage, and teamwork often outweigh size, strength, or pride. By dawn, the storm had mostly cleared. The horizon revealed distant groups of struggling cadets, some still alive, some fading. But the humans and their allies were ready. They had transformed the shelter into a survival network, extending warmth and life to those in need. Mason gathered his team. "We've turned a survival test into a teaching moment. The storm challenged us, the cold tried to break us, and yet here we are. Stronger, smarter, and prepared for whatever comes next. The human advantage is not strength alone. It is intelligence, foresight, and unity. That is why we survive when others fail." The aliens around him nodded silently, their respect for the humans evident. They had seen it firsthand. Humans thrived in frozen hells while other species struggled or perished. And so in the heart of Karnas 9, humans continued to build, plan, and teach. Their fortress of warmth stood strong against the cold. Their network of survival reached outward, saving as many as possible. And the galaxy, if it could see, would understand once more. Humanity's strength lies not just in body, but in mind and heart, and that makes humans unstoppable. The shelter glowed warmly against the icy dawn, a shining example of human ingenuity, courage, and leadership. The storm had tested them, and humans had not only survived, they had created hope, extended life, and demonstrated the true meaning of the HFY spirit. The final day on Karnas 9 dawned cold and harsh. The storm had mostly subsided, leaving only biting winds and treacherous ice drifts. The white plains stretched endlessly, shimmering under the pale twin moons. Every surviving cadet knew that this was the last day of the exam, the final hours that would decide who lived and who perished. Inside the human shelter, The air was warm and buzzing with quiet determination. Lieutenant Mason Hale moved calmly among the cadets, checking the thermal core, inspecting heat pockets, and watching the recovered aliens. Over the past 4 days, humans had transformed the small cave into a fortress, not just of warmth, but of life, intelligence, and hope. Morning report, Mason said. Core stable, heat pockets full, insulation intact. Everyone rested? Good. Today we survive and we save as many as we can. Remember, humans survive not because we are strong, but because we think and act faster than danger. Private Lena Ortiz checked the core one last time. Sir, efficiency is at maximum. We have enough energy to extend the heat network for the final rescue missions. Everything is ready, Mason nodded. Then let's move. Today we finish this exam, and we show the Academy exactly what humans are capable of. Outside, the storm's remnants had left a frozen wasteland of ice cliffs, fissures, and snowdrifts. Stragglers from alien teams huddled in small makeshift shelters, desperate, exhausted, and barely moving. Many had failed to survive the earlier days, but some still clung to life. Mason organized the team into groups. Humans led the operations, while recovered aliens followed instructions carefully, learning and cooperating. Sleds, heat reflectors, and portable heaters were distributed. Mason pointed toward a nearby ridge where several cadets were trapped. Move carefully. Use heat pockets. Stay low to avoid wind. Rescue those who cannot walk. The first group set out across the snow. A Valorian who had been saved earlier led the way, using newly learned techniques to navigate icy patches. Humans carried the weakest cadets, while the shelter team monitored heat and insulation remotely using signal devices. The scene was tense. Snow shifted underfoot. Ice cracked loudly and the wind threatened to push them off balance. But the humans remained calm. Mason's voice cut through the wind. Watch each other. Move as a unit. No one is left behind. At the ridge, they found a group of small alien cadets trembling and on the verge of collapse. The humans worked efficiently. Sleds were placed under them, ropes secured, and the entire group was guided back to the shelter. Every step was coordinated, every movement precise. One of the rescued cadets, a thin, furry alien, whispered, "You save everyone, even strangers?" Mason's eyes softened. Yes, humans survive by helping. Every life matters. Every life counts. That is our advantage. By midday, the humans had rescued nearly all surviving cadets in the vicinity. Frostbitten and exhausted, they were carefully thawed, fed, and positioned near the heat core. Every alien who had once doubted humans now watched in awe as the small team continued operations tirelessly. As the hours passed, Mason recognized that the exam had revealed more than survival skills. It had shown human ingenuity, leadership, and the ability to adapt under pressure. He gathered the team and the rescued aliens for a quick briefing. Today is not just about surviving, Mason said. It's about demonstrating that thinking, planning, and working together beats brute force and pride. The Academy wants to see who lasts, but lasting is meaningless if we do not help others survive. That is the true test. The aliens nodded quietly. Some had never experienced such coordination. Some had never received help from another species. And some now realized that humans were not just survivors. They were teachers, leaders, and innovators. Suddenly, a distant rumble echoed across the plains. Mason's eyes narrowed. Avalanche, he said calmly, pointing to a frozen ridge far off. Snow and ice began sliding slowly toward a group of cadets still trapped outside. Prepare rescue teams, Mason ordered. We have to act fast. Follow heat pockets, maintain insulation, and move carefully. Human and alien cadets worked together, carrying portable heaters and reflective panels to create temporary windbreaks. They moved quickly, systematically, and efficiently. The avalanche sped down the ridge, but the humans had anticipated the path and guided the cadets to safety just in time. No lives were lost. A Garathian, its fur matted with ice, stared at Mason in amazement. Your calculations? Your planning. They saved lives. Not just your own, but all of us, humans, are unstoppable. Mason smiled. We survive by thinking ahead, not reacting. That is the human advantage. Intelligence and courage together can overcome even the deadliest odds. By late afternoon, the shelter had grown into a small hub of activity. Cadets from multiple alien species now depended on the humans' knowledge and leadership. Mason and Ortiz supervised repairs, insulation, and heat distribution. Every layer of snow, every panel of metal, every heat pocket was placed deliberately, reflecting careful planning rather than chance. Outside, the last of the stranded cadets were guided in using portable heat reflectors. Each rescue was precise, controlled, and efficient. The humans had effectively created a network of survival across the frozen plains, a system that no other species had thought to build. Mason paused for a moment and looked at his team. "We've done more than survive. We've changed the rules of this exam. Humans are not just participants. We are leaders. We are innovators. And we do not leave anyone behind." The aliens around him nodded, some in awe, some in gratitude. The Valorian, now fully thawed, added quietly, "I underestimated humans. I see now. You are stronger than any test could measure. You survive with brains, courage, and heart." Mason's smile widened. "Exactly. And that is why the galaxy will always respect, fear, and admire humans. Strength alone is not enough. You need thinking, planning, and courage. That is what we bring to every challenge." As the sun began to set, the storm's shadows faded, leaving the frozen plains calm but still perilous. Mason gathered all survivors near the thermal core. They were tired, frostbitten, but alive. "Today," Mason said, "we finished the exam not just by surviving but by proving something important. We survived together. We helped others. We turned what was meant to be a deadly test into a demonstration of human ingenuity, teamwork, and courage. Let this be the lesson the Galactic Academy remembers. Humans adapt. Humans innovate, humans survive, and humans thrive where others fail." The aliens, once mocking, once doubtful, now looked at the humans with awe. Their respect was palpable. The Garathian nodded deeply. "You are extraordinary. Humans are unlike any species I have encountered. Small yet brilliant, weak yet unstoppable." Mason turned to his team. "We did this together. Each of you contributed, each of you adapted. Today we did more than survive. We showed the galaxy what humans are capable of." The thermal core hummed softly, radiating warmth into the cave. The snow outside glittered under the fading light, but inside, life had triumphed. Humans had not only endured the frozen hell of Karnas 9, they had created a fortress of hope, survival, and learning. The Galactic Academy instructors observed silently from a distance. They had designed the exam to test strength and survival instinct. What they had witnessed instead was human brilliance, planning, ingenuity, teamwork, and leadership under pressure. It was more than survival. It was a demonstration of what it meant to be human, the HFY spirit in its purest form. As night fell, the cadets inside the shelter rested, exhausted but alive. Mason checked the heat pockets one last time and nodded. The shelter was secure. The cadets were safe. Humans had turned a deadly exam into a story of triumph, teaching, and leadership. Outside, the frozen plains remained harsh, but the humans and their allies had proven one undeniable truth. No storm, no test, no environment could break humans when they acted with courage, intelligence, and unity. The exam was over. The survivors, guided by humans, had endured. The galaxy had witnessed it. And the legend of the small, clever, and unstoppable species called humans grew even stronger. Mason Hale looked at the horizon and smiled quietly. "Humans survive," he whispered, "and we thrive." The warmth of the shelter glowed against the icy world, a beacon of life, ingenuity, and hope. The frozen hell had been conquered, not through brute strength, not through luck, but through human courage, intelligence, and unbreakable spirit.